Hey guys, it's Paradise, and everyone is looking for new powerful builds, and we've put this one together and we can't stop using it. If you're looking for a fun build that also deals a ton of damage and uses one of the cool new weapon types, then you will want to give this hand-to-hand build a go. From Software added a lot of new weapon types in Shadows of the Erdtree, and a lot of them do look pretty amazing. But at the top of the list for us is the new martial hand-to-hand weapons. Because if you just look at the moveset for them, you can see the developers absolutely cooked with them. They have an awesome new moveset, they're very versatile and overall useful. They literally pack a punch, so with us being avid Faith build users, we wanted to know if there was any viable builds, as we didn't just want it to be another bleed build that's out there, because there's just so many of them, and to be honest, the Thorns build when it comes to bleed is just unbeatable. While the hand-to-hand weapons do have a whole cool moveset, something that blew us away was actually a single move, an Ash of War skill that's attached to this weapon by default, and this thing looks like it's straight out of a martial arts film or anime. So we set out to make a fun and viable build that would work in boss fights and allow us to absolutely clap them with the power of our faith, flaming, or holy god fist. When you're using this build, you literally feel like this, and it is awesome. One of the craziest things about this build though isn't the fact that you can just dish out incredible damage, but you can also stand there in the face of danger while doing it. These are just so fun to play, and I actually wish I picked these up earlier so I could have used them during most of my playthrough. But with that in mind, let us know if there's any new weapon types that you're loving at the moment, and leave a like on the video if you enjoy this build, and subscribe for even more coming soon. So how does it work? Well, Shadow of the Erdtree added two new hand-to-hand weapons, the Dryleaf Arts and the Dane's Footwork. Both of these are part of the same questline, but one comes much later towards the end game of the DLC. So for this build, we're going to focus on the Dryleaf Arts as they're much more accessible to the majority of players. The normal moveset for the Dryleaf Arts is really cool, and you do a bunch of quick hitting attacks. If you pair them with Talismans that give you bonuses on successive hits, you can really quickly rack up damage. The jumping attack leads into an awesome multi-hitting combo that's great for dealing burst damage, but the charged R2 attack does what I personally believe is one of the best looking normal moves aside from maybe the Beast Claws. So if you want to use all of that stuff with the build, you most certainly can, but most of the time in the DLC, the bosses are moving crazily around the place and you have a limited window to get damage in, meaning doing these long strings of punches and kicks isn't always going to be viable. Normally you have the choice of rolling through danger or face tanking it with something like a shield to create those damage windows. However, with this build, because the Dryleaf skill Palm Blast has stupidly high hyper armor, you can just stand there, tank the damage, and deal a ton of damage back. Obviously, this means you will be taking some damage, so you will have to dodge roll from time to time. But the actual damage that you're dealing is so high, it usually means you win the trade with enemies, so you win out in the end. The Dryleaf Arts can also be specced out into any of the different affinities. We're seeing a lot of people go down the path of Bleed and Frostbite, but we found, at least from our testing, that with the playstyle we're going for, focusing on the Flame art is the best. This gives us not only better faith scaling to the actual weapon damage, but gives us the option to bring buffs that focus on flame and fire incantations. As you can see, we would have to split our stats for a bleed build as the arcane scaling is only at D, with dex and strength both being C. This means you have to spread your stats out further across multiple different stat lines. Whereas we can actually get B scaling in faith, which is actually on the higher end for faith weapons in general, and it only has E in dex and strength, so you can really hone in on whichever faith option you want. But it is great overall that this weapon is very versatile, being able to spec into Frost, Bleed, or Keen if you wanted to, but for this Palm Blast playstyle, we believe that the Flame art or the Holy affinity works best, so we recommend giving these a try so you can go all in on Holy and benefit from the additional incantation buffs. There are two versions of this build based on the Faith affinity that you want to go for. If you're like 2-6 and you don't have the Faith Wet Blade to apply the Sacred affinity, as this is a missable Wet Blade in the base game, then instead you'll want to focus on the Flame art version, which is more accessible to people, and we're guessing a lot of you may be missing that Faith Wet Blade, so we'll focus on the Flame art version for now. But ultimately they do hit similar numbers, with the Holy version dealing slightly higher damage to some mobs in the DLC. Simply put, with a very high faith scaling and all of the incantations and buffs that we can bring, we can really pump the damage of this skill up. The actual playstyle of this build, even though it is simple, it's very satisfying, as all you have to do is two-hand the dry leaves and then charge up the Palm Blast attack. At maximum, it takes around 2.5 seconds to charge up, which could cause a problem with landing the hit, as bosses love to reposition a lot in this DLC. But the move actually has a lot of range, meaning that usually you can still hit them anyway as long as they haven't zoomed off into Narnia. It actually seems like the move does more damage when the target isn't super close to you, as I've had this hit for over 10k on distant targets. Plus, the move itself has a ton of hyper armor, so you can even just use it when they're attacking you to make your own damage window. Obviously, when doing this, you want to watch your health, as you can still take damage, but one thing to note is that this thing does a metric ton of poise or stagger damage. This means you can look death in the face and stagger a boss even while they're trying to attack you. Furthermore, the actual hyper armor the move gives you is insane, as from our testing, we've only been knocked out of one attack, which was the Gaius's charge move, and although we're not able to confirm this, it seems like when you're using Palm Blast, you have some kind of damage negation built in at around 25%. So let's get you all the parts you need, explain the stats and what you need to do. This one isn't too difficult to grab, and it can be done super early. So if you don't have the Dryleaf Arts yet, you can pick this up as part of the Dryleaf Dane questline. You're able to get this just after completing the first boss and arriving in the Skadu Atlas area. We're not too sure if you can just skip the first boss and start the quest anyway, but if you do know the answer to that, then share it down below, as during our testing we were locked out from it. So head to the High Road Cross Site of Grace, where you'll see a shiny on the floor that will give you a letter and a gesture. You will then need to go from the High Road Cross Grace Point to the Morth Ruins Grace Point, which is close by to the east. At this Site of Grace, you will see Dane just chilling there, and you can then challenge him to a fight by using the May the Best Win gesture that you picked up at the High Road Cross. This will put you into a Shadow Realm fight, and if you can beat him here, you will get the Dryleaf Arts weapon. For this build, we'll also be using a seal in the offhand, and because of our high faith, you ideally want to use the Erdtree Seal, as this has one of the best scalings for incantations, meaning if you bring offensive spells like Black Flame or any of the others, you'll deal the most damage with this one. If you don't have the Erdtree Seal, you can find it in the Volcano Manor near a prison cell near the Prison Town Church Site of Grace. However, any seal will do if you just want to use the buffs. And for the buffs, we want to bring the Golden Vow, as this increases our damage by 15% for 80 seconds, making the Palm Blast hit even harder, but you can add to this further by grabbing the Flame Grant Me Strength buff that not only adds to physical damage but also fire damage, giving 20 extra %. And then for our talismans, we're going to take everything that will buff our fire damage or charged attack damage, as the Palm Blast will benefit from these. Most of these talismans are from the base game, so you should have them already, and the first one will be Godfrey's Icon, which increases the damage of charged skills and spells by 15%. You can grab this here at the Golden Lineage Everjail. Next, we have the Fire Scorpion Charm, and there's a bunch of these in the game to cover the different elemental types of damage, and this one boosts your fire damage at the cost of taking more damage. Essentially, this gives us 12% more fire damage, and we take 10% more physical damage. This one can be found up the ramparts on the wooden platform to the west within Mount Gelmir. And then we have the Shard of Alexander, and this one takes a little while to get if you don't have it. You basically have to do the whole of Alexander's questline in the base game. So you could swap this out for extra damage mitigation talismans, but this is super useful as it boosts the attack of skills by 15%. Finally, you have a slot to slap in whatever you want. This could be more defensive talismans or something to boost your health, and you could use the Ritual Talisman to boost your damage when at max HP, but since you'll likely be trading hits with enemies, it doesn't work all that well. From here, we can boost things even further by using our Wondrous Physics mix, and we want to use the Stone Barbed Tear, as this allows us to break stances even faster, which is great since this thing breaks stances super fast anyway. On top of this, the Flame Shroud Tear will be great for an additional 20% fire damage, which will stack with all the other sources like our Fire Scorpion Charm. If you are using the holy version of the build instead, then swap out your Scorpion Charm and your Wondrous Physics Mix Flask for the holy version instead to boost that damage type. You can take this further by grabbing the Aged One Talisman that increases your damage when under Madness with the Howl of Shabriri, but I normally just like to take 2 buffs so I'm not standing there like this before a fight.
Breath of Magic Caster, Infinity Wall, Magic Ward Holy, Life Essence, Greater Full Potential.
For the armor, we're going to be using Rakshas's armor, which gives you 8% more damage at the cost of taking 8% more damage. This one can be a bit tricky because we are looking to tank a bunch of damage, but nothing can hurt you if it's already dead, right? You get this from the Eastern Nameless Mausoleum after defeating Rakshasa. In line with this idea, you can also use the Blood-Sucking Tear if you want to, as that gives you a massive 20% attack power increase, but does drain your health over time, which can be hard to top up when face tanking damage. For your stats though, you want to get as much vigor as you can. For the DLC, we definitely recommend between 50 and 60. For your mind, we won't be using this too much, so anything between 17 and 25 will be great. For your endurance, the Palm Blast does chonk a lot of endurance per cast, so 20 to 25 is recommended. For the main stat of the build, we are dumping 80 points into Faith, as this is our best scaling stat for the Dryleaf when using the Flame Art, which is what we're using, and then you can allocate the rest to Dex and Strength based on how many points you have left over. For our current version of the build, we are a little over level 150, which is the common level that people are at, but if you want to see our stat allocations to copy, here you go. And so there you have it, everything you need to hit like a truck with the Dryleaf and the Palm Blast skill. This is probably one of our favorite builds in the whole DLC so far, it's just so fun. It's one of those builds that feels really stupid powerful, but also fun and dumb at the same time. With all of the buffs applied, we've actually seen this thing hit as high as 14k, and it regularly hits between 6 and 9k on bosses, which is pretty sizable considering you can spam it without too much trouble. We don't even have all of the Shadow Tree blessings, we only have around 6 at the moment, so just imagine if you've maxed out all of your fragments, how far this build could go. If you are struggling with Elden Ring, we highly recommend giving this build a try, as you don't even need to dodge roll or read bosses' movesets all that much. Give it a go because it's a ton of fun, but do tell us what other builds you're loving at the moment, and drop a like and comment to let us know if you enjoyed this video. We have loads more Elden Ring coming your way soon, so make sure you're subscribed down below so you don't miss out.